Imagine a fog-drenched manor in the heart of Sussex, where whispers of a vampire haunt the halls. A mother stands accused of drinking her child's blood, and the truth is buried in a maze of lies. Can Sherlock Holmes unravel the mystery before the darkness claims another victim? The fog clung to the Sussex moors like a shroud, muffling the clatter of our carriage wheels as Dr. John Watson and I approached the Ferguson estate. It was November 1895, and the air carried a chill that seeped into the bones. I, Sherlock Holmes, had seen many a strange case, but the letter from Robert Ferguson, scrawled in a hand trembling with desperation, promised something extraordinary. His wife, Isabella, stood accused of an act so monstrous it defied reason, drinking the blood of their infant son. The word vampire was not written, but its shadow loomed over every line. Watson, ever the steadfast companion, sat beside me, his brow furrowed as he reread the letter. "Holmes, do you truly believe this nonsense about vampirism? It's the stuff of Gothic novels, not science." "Belief is irrelevant, Watson," I replied, adjusting my scarf against the damp. "Facts are what matter. A child is harmed, a mother accused, and a household gripped by fear. That is our puzzle." The carriage slowed, and the Ferguson manor emerged from the mist. A sprawling Gothic pile, its towers clawing at the sky. Ivy strangled the stone walls, and the windows glowed faintly, like eyes peering through the fog. A butler, gaunt and pale, ushered us into a dimly lit hall where Robert Ferguson awaited. He was a man in his late 40s, broad-shouldered but haggard, his eyes red from sleepless nights. "Mr. Holmes, Dr. Watson, thank God you've come," he said, his voice cracking. "My home is cursed. My wife, she's not herself. I saw her with my own eyes, blood on her lips, hovering over our baby's crib." Watson shifted uncomfortably, but I pressed forward. "Describe the scene precisely, Mr. Ferguson. Omit nothing." He recounted the night 2 days prior, a scream from the nursery, his rush upstairs, and the sight of Isabella, her dark hair wild, kneeling by the crib. Blood stained her lips, and the infant Thomas wailed, a strange bruise on his neck. The maid, Elena, had pulled Isabella away, whispering in a foreign tongue. Since then, the household whispered of vampires fueled by local legends and the suspicions of Dr. Amos Carver, the village physician. "Take us to the nursery," I said. The room was small, its walls papered in faded green, a single gas lamp casting long shadows. The crib stood in the corner, its blankets askew. I examined the bruise on the child's neck, purple, irregular but not a bite. My lens revealed no puncture marks, only a faint residue of something sticky. Isabella, summoned at my request, entered like a specter. She was young, perhaps 25, with striking features from her Peruvian heritage, dark eyes, olive skin, and a guarded expression. "Mrs. Ferguson," I began, "what happened that night?" Her voice was low, trembling. "I heard Thomas cry. I went to him and I don't know. There was blood. I swear I didn't harm him." Her hands twisted together, and I noted a faint tremor. Watson, ever empathetic, softened. "We're here to help, madam." But my attention was elsewhere. A small wooden carving, intricate and unmistakably South American, sat on a shelf, a jaguar with emerald eyes. It was out of place in this English nursery. I turned to Elena, the maid, who lingered by the door. Her eyes darted to the carving, then away. "Miss Martinez, what is Dance Joyan?" I asked, holding it up. "A family heirloom," she said quickly. "It protects the child." I said nothing, but my mind catalogued the detail. Protection, or something else? The room held other clues. A faint herbal scent, a smudge on the windowsill, and the fact that Jack, Ferguson's teenage son from his first marriage, had not joined us. His absence was telling. As we left the nursery, Watson whispered, "Holmes, this feels unnatural. The blood, the bruise. Could there be truth to the rumors?" "Superstition clouds judgment, Watson. Blood can come from many sources, and bruises tell stories of their own. We need more data." We dined with the family that evening. A tense affair. Jack, a sullen boy of 17, glared at Isabella across the table. Robert tried to maintain civility, but his hands shook as he cut his meat. Elena served in silence, her eyes never meeting mine. Dr. Carver, invited at my insistence, spoke of local tales. A vampire said to haunt the moors centuries ago. Watson listened, rapt, but I focused on the boy. Jack's fingers tightened around, his fork when Isabella spoke, and I noted a faint scratch on his wrist. After dinner, I examined the grounds. The manor was surrounded by dense woods, the fog thicker now, swallowing sound. Watson followed, his revolver at the ready. "Holmes, this place feels like a tomb." "An apt metaphor," I replied, my eyes scanning the undergrowth. Then I saw it, a flicker of movement, a shadow among the trees. Not an animal, but a figure, cloaked and still, watching the manor. Before I could move, it vanished into the fog. "Watson, did you see that?" I asked. He nodded, his face pale. "Someone's out there, Holmes. Someone who doesn't want to be seen." I turned back to the manor, its silhouette looming against the moonless sky. The pieces were falling into place, but the puzzle was far from solved. Blood, a bruise, a carving, and now a shadow. Something sinister was at play, and I would uncover it, no matter how dark the truth. The fog had thickened around the Ferguson estate by morning, wrapping the manor in a gray veil that seemed to pulse with secrets. The shadow I had glimpsed last night lingered in my mind, a specter that refused to be dismissed as mere fancy. I, Sherlock Holmes, stood at the nursery window, my eyes tracing the smudge on the sill, a faint mark, as if something had brushed against it in haste. The jaguar carving, with its emerald eyes glinting in the dim light, watched me from its shelf, as if daring me to unravel its meaning. Dr. John Watson joined me, his face still pale from our encounter in the woods. "Holmes, that figure last night, do you think it's connected to this vampire nonsense?" "Everything is connected, Watson, until proven otherwise," I replied, my fingers probing the windowsill. The smudge was waxy, suggestive of a substance applied deliberately. "But we must separate fact from fear. Vampires are the stuff of folklore. Bruises and blood are not." Our first task was to interview the household, to peel back the layers of tension that clung to the manor like the fog outside. Robert Ferguson led us to the drawing room where the family and staff awaited. The air was heavy with the scent of old wood and wax polish, and the fire in the grate did little to dispel the chill. Isabella sat by the window, her dark eyes fixed on the moors, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Jack, the sullen teenager, slouched in an armchair, his gaze darting between resentment and defiance. Elena Martinez, the Peruvian maid, stood by the door, her posture rigid, while Dr. Amos Carver, the village physician, fidgeted with his spectacles, his nervous energy palpable. "Mr. Holmes," Robert began, his voice strained, "I beg you to find the truth. My wife is no monster, but I cannot explain what I saw." I turned to Isabella. "Mrs. Ferguson, you said you found blood in the nursery. Did you touch the child? Before or after you noticed it?" She hesitated, her lips parting slightly. "After. I lifted Thomas to comfort him, and then I saw it was on his neck, and somehow on me. I don't know how." Her voice trembled, but her eyes held a flicker of something. Fear, perhaps, or secrecy. I noted the way her fingers brushed. A small pendant at her throat, a silver disc etched with unfamiliar symbols. "Miss Martinez," I said, turning to the maid, "you were there that night. What did you see?" Elena's eyes flicked to Isabella, then back to me. "I heard the baby cry. I ran in and found Mrs. Ferguson holding him. There was blood. I pulled her away to protect the child." "Protect him from what?" I pressed. "From harm," she said quickly, too quickly. "In my country we have stories. Of old blood, of curses that linger." Watson leaned forward, his curiosity piqued. "Curses? You mean like vampires?" Elena's face tightened and she crossed her arms. "Not vampires, Doctor. Spirits. Ancestors who demand payment for old sins." Dr. Carver cleared his throat, his voice thin. "There are local tales, Mr. Holmes. Centuries ago, a woman was burned in these parts for drinking blood. They say her spirit haunts the moors, seeking new hosts." "Nonsense," I said sharply, though I noted Watson's unease. "Superstition is a fog of its own, obscuring truth. Dr. Carver, you examined the child. What did you find?" "The bruise on the neck," he said, adjusting his spectacles. "It's irregular. Not quite a bite, but suggestive. And the blood, it was fresh, as if drawn recently." I turned to Jack, who had remained silent, his eyes boring into Isabella. "Master Ferguson, you were not in the nursery that night. Where were you?" "Out," he said curtly, his voice low. "Walking the grounds. I don't sleep well." His scratch from last night, barely healed, caught my eye. "Alone?" I asked. He nodded, but his jaw tightened, and I knew he was lying. The boy's resentment toward his stepmother was palpable, a thread I would tug later. After the interviews, I returned to the nursery alone, my lens in hand. The bruise on young Thomas's neck was troubling, not a bite, but a pressure mark, possibly from a cloth or instrument. The sticky residue intrigued me further. I scraped a sample into a vial and detected a faint herbal scent, bitter and unfamiliar. It was not a common English plant, suggesting a connection to Isabella's or Elena's South American origins. As evening fell, Watson insisted on exploring the woods, driven by his unease about the shadow figure. "Holmes, we can't ignore what we saw. Someone is watching this house." "Very well," I said, slipping my coat on. "But tread carefully, Watson. The fog hides more than it reveals. The moors were a labyrinth of mist and shadow, the trees skeletal against the gray. We moved silently, guided by the faint path from the manor. The air was thick, muffling our steps, and I strained to hear any sign of our quarry. Then through the fog, I saw it. A flicker of light, like a lantern swiftly extinguished. Watson gripped his revolver, his breath visible in the cold. We crept closer, finding a small clearing. In its center stood a crude altar of stones, adorned, with symbols carved in chalk, circles and jagged lines, reminiscent of the jaguar carving style. A bundle of herbs, partially burned, lay nearby, their scent matching the residue from the nursery. "Holmes," Watson whispered, "this looks like a ritual. Could Elena's talk of curses have weight?" "Rituals are human inventions, Watson," I said, examining the symbols. "But they often mask human motives. Someone wants us to believe in the supernatural." I pocketed a fragment of the herbs, noting their charred edges. As we turned to leave, a rustle broke the silence. A figure darting through the trees. Watson gave chase, his boots thudding against the damp earth, but the fog swallowed the figure before we could close the distance. We returned to the clearing, frustrated, only to find the altar disturbed, the herbs scattered as if in haste. Back at the manor, the household was abuzz. Robert met us at the door, his face ashen. "Holmes, it's Isabella. She's locked herself in her room and we heard a scream." We raced upstairs, Watson's revolver still in hand. The door to Isabella's room was barred from the inside, the wood solid and unyielding. I knocked sharply. "Mrs. Ferguson, open the door at once." No response came, only a faint sob. Watson looked to me, his eyes wide with the same dread that had gripped him in the woods. I pressed my ear to the door, hearing a faint shuffle, then silence. Something was terribly wrong, and the whispers of vampirism seemed to coil tighter around the truth. I stepped back, my mind racing. The herbs, the symbols, the shadow, all pieces of a puzzle that refused to align. But one thing was certain. The darkness the household feared was closer than they knew, and I would not rest until I dragged it into the light. The scream from Isabella Ferguson's room still echoed in my ears as Dr. John Watson and I stood before her locked door, the heavy oak unyielding under my knocks. The Ferguson manor, shrouded in fog, seemed to hold its breath, the air thick with the weight of secrets. I, Sherlock Holmes, had faced many mysteries. But the whispers of vampirism and the shadow in the woods suggested a puzzle far darker than I had anticipated. The ritualistic symbols we found in the clearing, the herbal residue in the nursery, and now this scream, all pointed to a truth buried deep within this troubled household. Watson, his revolver still gripped tightly, pressed his ear to the door. "Holmes, she's in distress. We must get inside." "Patience, Watson," I said, examining the lock. It was a sturdy brass mechanism, not easily forced. "Force may destroy evidence. Mrs. Ferguson, can you hear me? Open the door." A faint sob came from within, followed by a muffled voice. I can't. It's not safe." Robert Ferguson, his face ashen, joined us, wringing his hands. "Please." "Mr. Holmes, she's my wife. If she's hurt—" I raised a hand to silence him. "Mr. Ferguson, fetch the butler and any spare keys. Quickly." As Robert hurried off, I inspected the doorframe, noting faint scratches near the lock, as if someone had tampered with it. The wood was old, but the marks were fresh, suggesting recent activity. Watson, ever the man of action, paced nervously. "Holmes, that scream. It's like the nursery all over again. Could the shadow we saw be inside?" "Possible, but unlikely," I replied, my mind racing through the facts. "The shadow fled the woods, and this door is locked from within. We're dealing with something, or someone, closer to home." The butler arrived with a ring of keys, and after a tense moment, one turned in the lock. The door creaked open, revealing Isabella seated on the floor, her dark hair disheveled, her hands clutching her pendant. The room was in disarray, papers scattered, a chair overturned, and a faint metallic scent lingered in the air. Her eyes, wide with fear, darted to the window, where the curtains fluttered despite the closed pane. "Mrs. Ferguson," I said, stepping forward. "What happened?" She struggled to speak, her voice trembling. "I was alone. Then something grabbed me. I screamed, and it was gone. I locked the door to keep it out." Watson knelt beside her, his medical instincts taking over. "Are you injured, madam?" She shook her head, but I noticed a faint red mark on her wrist, not unlike the bruise on the baby's neck. "Describe this something," I said. "It was a shadow," she whispered. "Like a man, but silent. I couldn't see his face." I crossed to the window, examining the sill. There were scratches here, too, deeper than those in the nursery, and a trace of the same waxy substance I'd found before. The window was locked, but the latch was loose, suggesting it could be forced from outside. My lens revealed a single drop of red liquid on the floor, glistening in the gaslight. I collected it in a vial, noting its viscosity, thicker than blood, with a faint herbal tang. "Holmes," Watson said, pointing to the overturned chair. "This room was staged to look like a struggle. But why lock herself in?" "A pertinent question," I replied, scanning the room. My eyes fell on a small writing desk, its drawer slightly ajar. Inside, I found a bundle of papers, mostly letters in Spanish, but one item stood out, an old leather-bound diary, its pages yellowed and edges frayed. The cover bore the initials EF, likely a Ferguson ancestor. I slipped it into my coat, sensing it held answers. Robert returned, his face a mask of anguish. "Is she safe? What's happening to my family?" "She's unharmed," I said. "But I must secure this room for further investigation. No one enters without my permission." As Watson helped Isabella to another room, I questioned the household again. Jack, the sullen teenager, lingered in the hall, his eyes fixed on his stepmother with undisguised contempt. "She's a witch," he muttered. "Ever since she came, this house has been cursed." "Strong words, Master Ferguson," I said, noting his clenched fists. "What makes you say that?" "She's not one of us," he spat. "Her and that maid, always whispering in their language, bringing their strange idols. My mother was alive before she came." Robert overheard and snapped, "Enough, Jack! Isabella is my wife, and you'll show respect." The boy stormed off, his footsteps echoing down the hall. I turned to Elena, who had been watching silently. "Miss Martinez, you mentioned old blood yesterday. Care to elaborate?" Her eyes narrowed, but she spoke softly. "In Peru, my people believe blood carries memory. Mrs. Ferguson's family. They carry a heavy past. I only wish to protect her." Her words were vague, yet deliberate, and I sensed she was withholding more than she revealed. Dr. Carver, hovering nearby, added, "Mr. Holmes, I've seen cases like this. Hysteria, perhaps, or something darker. The bruise on the child. Now this attack. It's unnatural." "Unnatural is a term for the lazy, Doctor," I said. "I deal in facts, not fancies." That evening I sat by the fire in our guest room, the diary open before me. Watson, nursing, a brandy, watched me with concern. "Holmes, this place is getting to me. The scream, the shadow, those symbols in the woods. It's as if the manor itself is alive with malice." "Imagination, Watson," I said, though I admitted the atmosphere was oppressive. The diary's first pages, written in a spidery hand, chronicled the life of Edward Ferguson, Robert's great-uncle, who traveled to South America in the 1820s. One entry caught my eye. "The pact was sealed in blood, binding our line to theirs. The price is steep, but the fortune is ours. A blood pact." The phrase sent a chill through me, not for its supernatural implications, but for what it suggested about human greed. I turned to another page, finding a sketch of a symbol. A circle with jagged lines, identical to those in the clearing. This was no coincidence. "Holmes," Watson said, interrupting my thoughts, "do you think Isabella is lying? Her story about the attack feels rehearsed." "Possibly," I said, closing the diary. "But lies are often born of fear, not guilt. We need to know what, or who, she's afraid of." I stood, intending to examine the nursery again, when a faint creak came from the hall. Watson grabbed his revolver, and we stepped outside, the gas lights flickering. The corridor was empty, but a draft carried the same herbal scent from the nursery. I followed it to a small closet, its door ajar. Inside, tucked behind a stack of linens, was a wooden box, its lid carved with the same jaguar motif as the nursery's artifact. I opened it, revealing a collection of dried herbs and a small vial of red liquid, identical to the one from Isabella's room. Before I could examine further, a piercing scream shattered the silence, not from Isabella's room, but from the nursery. Watson and I raced down the hall, my heart pounding despite my resolve. The door was open, and inside, the crib was empty, the blankets strewn across the floor. Watson's face drained of color. "Holmes, the baby. Thomas is gone." I scanned the room, my mind racing. The window was still locked, the smudge undisturbed. Whoever, or whatever, had taken the child had been inside the manor all along. The whispers of vampirism, the shadow, in the fog, And now this abduction formed a web of deceit, and I was determined to cut through it before another life was lost. The empty crib in the Ferguson Manor's nursery sent a chill through the air, sharper than the November fog that pressed against the windows. The disappearance of young Thomas, coupled with the whispers of vampirism that haunted this house, had turned suspicion into panic. I, Sherlock Holmes, stood in the nursery, my eyes scanning every detail. The strewn blankets, the locked window, the faint herbal scent lingering like a ghost. The scream that had drawn us here still echoed in my mind, a reminder of the hook that had set this case in motion. A mother accused, a truth buried in lies, and a darkness threatening to claim another victim. Dr. John Watson, his face pale, gripped his revolver as he searched the room. Holmes, how could someone take the child without breaking the window? They were inside the manor. Precisely, Watson, I said, kneeling by the crib. My lens revealed a faint smudge on the blanket, a trace of the same waxy substance from Isabella's room and the nursery sill. The kidnapper knew the house well. This was no phantom. Robert Ferguson burst into the room, his eyes wild. My son! Holmes, you must find him! Isabella, she's beside herself! I turned to him, my voice calm but firm. Mr. Ferguson, gather the household in the drawing room. No one leaves the manor until I say so. As Robert hurried off, I examined the diary I'd found in Isabella's room. Its pages heavy with the weight of history. The entries, penned by Edward Ferguson in the 1820s, spoke of a journey to Peru where he struck a deal with a local family, the Martinezes, a name that matched Elena's. The blood pact mentioned a fortune tied to artifacts smuggled to England, but at a cost, a vow of silence, sealed with rituals. The sketch of the jagged circle symbol, identical to those in the woods, suggested a connection to the strange altar Watson and I had found. Holmes, Watson said, his voice low. This diary, it's like a confession. Could it explain the vampire rumors? Not vampires, Watson, I replied, closing the book. Greed and fear cloaked in superstition, but the child's disappearance is no myth. We must act swiftly. We descended to the drawing room where the household waited in tense silence. Isabella sat by the fire, her face buried in her hands, her pendant glinting in the flickering light. Jack stood by the window, his arms crossed, his expression unreadable. Elena hovered near Isabella, her eyes darting nervously. Dr. Amos Carver, the village physician, clutched his medical bag, muttering about curses. Mrs. Ferguson, I began, when did you last see Thomas? She lifted her head, her voice barely a whisper. An hour ago, before I went to my room. He was sleeping. I swear I didn't— Enough! Jack snapped, his voice cutting through the room. She's lying, Holmes. She's always sneaking into the nursery, whispering her foreign nonsense. She took him. Robert stepped forward. His face flushed. Jack, hold your tongue. Isabella would never harm our son. I raised a hand. Master Ferguson, your accusations are noted, but evidence is what we seek. Miss Martinez, you were in the nursery earlier. Did you see anything unusual? Elena hesitated, her fingers brushing her own pendant, a match to Isabella's. No, sir. I checked on the baby, then left. Everything was quiet. Her evasiveness was palpable, but before I could press further, Watson gasped, pointing to the window. Holmes, look! Outside, in the fog, a piece of paper was pinned to the gate, fluttering in the wind. I strode out, Watson at my heels, and retrieved it. The note, scrawled in a hurried hand, read, "The blood will flow. Return what was taken, or the child pays the price." Watson's hand tightened on his revolver. Holmes, this is a ransom note. But what do they mean by what was taken? The diary may hold the answer, I said, folding the note carefully. It speaks of a fortune, likely the artifacts Edward Ferguson brought from Peru. Someone believes they're still here. Back inside, I locked the nursery and Isabella's room, declaring them off limits. I then took Isabella aside, away from the others' prying eyes. "Mrs. Ferguson, the diary mentions your family, the Martinezes. What do you know of this pact?" Her eyes widened, and for the first time, fear gave way to something like guilt. "My grandmother told stories of a debt owed to the Fergusons. She said our family was cursed for helping them, that the blood of our ancestors demanded payment. I thought it was just a tale." "And the pendant?" I asked, pointing to the silver disc at her throat. "It's a family heirloom," she said, clutching it. "A symbol of protection. Elena wears one too." I nodded, filing the information away. The pendants, the diary, the ritual symbols, all pointed to a shared history between the Fergusons and the Martinezes, one that someone was exploiting. But the child's disappearance was immediate, and time was slipping away. I sent Watson to check the manor's exits while I searched the grounds, my lantern cutting through the fog. Near the gate, I found fresh footprints, boots, size 9, with a distinctive worn heel. They led toward the woods, then vanished into the undergrowth. The shadow figure was no phantom. He was flesh and blood, and he was close. Returning to the manor, I found Watson in the nursery, his face grim. "Holmes, the baby's blanket, it's stained with blood. Not much, but enough to notice." I examined the stain, my lens confirming it was fresh, but its texture matched the red liquid from Isabella's room and the Jaguar box. "This is no blood," I said, "but a plant extract, likely from the herbs we found. Someone is staging a vampire myth. But the child's danger is real." Dr. Carver, summoned to examine the baby's condition before his disappearance, joined us. "The bruise on Thomas's neck," he said. "It's worsened since I last saw him. And now this. Blood, it's as if the curse is real." "Enough of curses, doctor," I snapped. "The bruise suggests pressure, not teeth. I suspect a toxin, possibly from the herbs. Have you seen similar symptoms in your practice?" He hesitated, then nodded. "Once, years ago, a patient with a rare fever, bleeding gums, bruising easily. But it was no curse, just illness." "Exactly," I said. "We're dealing with science, not superstition. But someone wants us to believe otherwise." As night deepened, I retreated to our guest room, the diary open before me. Its pages revealed more. Edward Ferguson had betrayed the Martinezes, keeping the fortune for himself and leaving their family to face ruin. The blood pact was a vow of revenge, sworn by a Martinez ancestor. Could Elena or even Isabella be acting on that vow? Or was someone else manipulating the legend? For their own ends? Watson paced, his nerves frayed. Holmes, the note, the blood, the missing child. This feels like a nightmare. What if the shadow took Thomas? "The shadow is a man, Watson, not a specter," I said. "And men leave traces. The footprints, the note, the herbs, all point to a calculated plan." I turned to the vial of red liquid, analyzing it under the lantern's light. Its properties matched a South American plant, Sangre de Drago, known for its blood-like sap and mild toxicity. Someone was using it to mimic vampiric attacks, but why? And where was Thomas? A sudden commotion broke my thoughts. Robert burst in, his voice frantic. "Holmes, it's happened again! Isabella! She's in the nursery, and there's blood on her hands!" We raced to the nursery, finding Isabella kneeling by the empty crib, her hands stained red, her eyes wide with horror. Elena stood behind her, whispering in Spanish, while Jack watched from the doorway, his face twisted with rage. The scene was a chilling echo of the first incident, and the fog outside seemed to press closer, as if the manor itself was complicit in the lies. "Mrs. Ferguson," I said, my voice cutting through the chaos, "explain this at once." She looked up, tears streaming down her face. "I came to pray for Thomas, and the blood was here on the floor. I touched it. I swear I didn't." Before she could finish, a faint cry echoed from the manor's upper floors. A child's cry, faint but unmistakable. Watson's eyes met mine, and we bolted toward the sound, the household trailing behind. The truth was close, but the darkness was closer still, and I feared we were running out of time. The faint cry of a child, piercing the oppressive silence of the Ferguson manor, sent a jolt through my nerves. It came from the upper floors, a sound both fragile and urgent, pulling Dr. John Watson and me from the chaos of the nursery where Isabella knelt, her hands stained with what I now knew was not blood but sangre de drago, a South American plant extract. The fog outside the manor seemed to thicken, as if conspiring to hide the truth, echoing the whispered dread of vampirism that had gripped this household. I, Sherlock Holmes, felt the pieces of this puzzle, diary, symbols, and a missing child, drawing closer, yet the maze of lies promised by our case's grim prelude remained elusive. Watson, his revolver drawn, was already halfway up the staircase, his face set with determination. "Holmes, that was Thomas. We must find him before it's too late." "Caution, Watson," I called, following swiftly. "The cry is a lead, but also a lure. Stay sharp." The household trailed behind, Robert Ferguson, his eyes wild with hope and fear, Isabella trembling but resolute, Elena, her expression unreadable, and Jack lingering at the rear, his sullen demeanor tinged with something darker. Dr. Amos Carver, clutching his medical bag, muttered about curses, but I ignored him. The cry had come from the attic, a part of the manor we had yet to explore. The attic door, tucked at the end of a narrow corridor, was ajar, its hinges creaking as we pushed through. The air was musty, heavy with dust and the faint scent of herbs. Old furniture, draped in sheets, loomed like specters in the dim light of my lantern. The cry came again, weaker now, from behind a stack of crates. Watson lunged forward, pulling aside a tarp to reveal nothing. The space was empty, the cry silenced. "Holmes, it was here," Watson said, his voice tight. "I swear I heard it." I knelt, examining the floor. A faint scuff mark, fresh in the dust, suggested movement, and a single drop of the red sap glistened nearby. "Someone was here, Watson, and recently, but the child is elsewhere." Robert's voice broke. "My son, where is he? Holmes, you promised answers." "I promised truth, Mr. Ferguson," I said, rising, "and I suspect the truth lies beyond these walls. The shadow we saw in the woods, he's the key." Watson's eyes widened. "You think the shadow took Thomas?" "Or knows who did," I replied. "The footprints by the gate, the note, demanding what was taken. They point to the woods. We must hunt our quarry tonight." Leaving the household under strict orders to remain in the drawing room, Watson and I armed ourselves, his revolver, my stout stick, and ventured into the fog-drenched moors. The night was black, the mist so thick it seemed to cling to our skin. The path from the manor led to the clearing where we'd found the ritual altar, its chalk symbols now smudged but still recognizable. I scanned the ground, finding the same. Boot prints from the gate, size 9, worn heel, leading deeper into the woods. "Holmes," Watson whispered, his breath visible in the cold. "This feels like a trap." "Likely," I said, my lantern casting eerie shadows. "But traps reveal their makers. Stay close." We followed the prints to a small campsite, abandoned but recent. A fire pit, still warm, held charred remnants of the same herbs from the nursery. A torn piece of cloth caught on a branch bore a faint monogram, L.W., and nearby a matchbox from a London apothecary, Grimshaw and Sons, lay discarded. I pocketed both, my mind racing. The apothecary was a lead, but the cloth suggested a new player in this game. Watson froze, pointing to the trees. "Holmes there!" A figure moved through the fog, a cloaked shadow, swift and silent. I gave chase, Watson at my heels, our boots sinking into the muddy earth. The figure was agile, weaving through the trees, but I caught a glimpse of a pale hand clutching something small, a bundle, perhaps a child. My heart quickened, not from exertion but from the stakes. If that was Thomas, we could not fail. "Stop!" Watson shouted, raising his revolver, but the fog swallowed the figure. We reached a narrow stream, its banks slick, where the prints vanished. The shadow had crossed or doubled back. I scanned the opposite bank, finding a single footprint, but no sign of the bundle. "Damn it, Holmes," Watson panted. "He's gone." "And Thomas? Where is he?" "Not far," I said, my voice steady despite the frustration. "The cry came from the manor, but the shadow is working with someone inside. The matchbox and cloth will lead us to them." We returned to the clearing, where I examined the altar more closely. The symbols I now saw were not random. They mirrored those in the diary, tied to the Martinez family's rituals. The herbs were sangre de drago, confirming my suspicion of a staged vampire myth. But the child's absence was no stagecraft. It was a calculated move to pressure someone, likely Isabella or Robert. Back at the manor, dawn was breaking, the fog thinning to reveal the grim silhouette of the estate. The household was still in the drawing room, but Jack was missing. I found him in the stables, saddling a horse, his face pale and his hands trembling. "Going somewhere, Master Ferguson?" I asked, blocking his path. He flinched, his eyes darting. I can't stay here. She's poisoning everything. Isabella, her maid, their curses." "You've been watching her," I said, stepping closer. "You were in the woods, weren't you? Spying on her, perhaps leaving that note?" His jaw tightened, but he shook his head. "I didn't take Thomas. I just want her gone. She's not my mother." His words carried the weight of grief, but also deception. The scratch on his wrist, the lie about his whereabouts the night of the first incident. I suspected he knew more than he admitted. Before I could press further, Elena appeared, her face drawn. "Mr. Holmes," she said, "Dr. Carver wants you. He says the baby's condition. It's worse than he thought." In the drawing room, Carver was examining a small vial of the red sap found in the nursery. "This isn't blood," he said, echoing my findings. "But the bruise on Thomas's neck from what I saw before, it's symptomatic of a toxin. If he's not treated soon, he could—" He stopped, but the implication was clear. Robert clutched Isabella, who was weeping silently. "Holmes, find my son," he begged. I turned to Elena. "Miss Martinez, your pendant and Isabella's, they match the diary's symbols. You spoke of old blood. Is this toxin part of your family's rituals?" Her eyes flashed with defiance. "I protect Mrs. Ferguson. The Martinezes owe her family loyalty, not harm." "Then who took the child?" I demanded. She hesitated, then whispered, "The shadow. He's not what you think. He's been watching us for weeks." Before I could question her further, a rustle came from the woods, audible through the open window. Watson grabbed his revolver and ran outside with me close behind. The fog was lifting, but the trees still hid their secrets. Then, a figure emerged, a man, cloaked, his face obscured. He raised a hand as if in warning and then darted back into the woods. Watson fired a warning shot, but the figure was gone. As we reached the spot where he'd stood, I found a single object dropped in his haste, a small silver knife etched with the same jagged circle symbol. It was no ritual tool. It was a weapon, sharp and practical. "Holmes," Watson gasped, his voice shaking, "he's armed. And if he has Thomas—" "He doesn't," I said, holding up the knife. This was a distraction. The child is still in the manor or close by. But the shadow is desperate, and desperation breeds mistakes. As we turned back to the manor, a gunshot rang out, not from Watson's revolver, but from the woods. The sound was sharp, final, and it sent a chill through me. The maze of lies was unraveling, but the darkness was closing in, and I feared we were one step behind the truth. The gunshot that shattered the stillness of the Sussex moors sent a ripple of dread through the fog, its echo lingering like the whisper of the vampire myth that had ensnared the Ferguson manor. The silver knife, etched with the jagged circle, symbol, lay heavy in my pocket as Dr. John Watson and I stood frozen, the manor's silhouette looming behind us. I, Sherlock Holmes, knew the sound was no accident. It was a signal, a desperate act in the maze of lies that threatened to claim young Thomas Ferguson. The child's cry, the staged blood, and the shadow figure were pieces of a puzzle, and I was determined to fit them together before the darkness claimed another victim. Watson, his revolver still raised, scanned the woods. Holmes, that shot, it came from the direction of the clearing. The shadow could have Thomas. Or he wants us to think so, I said, my voice steady despite the urgency. The knife suggests intent, but the gunshot suggests panic. We must move quickly, but not blindly. We retraced our steps through the fog, the matchbox from Grimshaw and Sons Apothecary, and the monogrammed cloth, LW, in my mind. The clearing was empty when we arrived, the ritual altar now scattered, as if someone had fled in haste. The boot prints, size 9, worn heel, led toward a narrow path deeper into the woods. I knelt, finding a fresh blood stain on a leaf, real this time, not the Sangre de Drago sap. It was a small amount, likely from a graze, suggesting the gunshot had found a mark. Holmes, look, Watson said, pointing to a broken branch. A scrap of black cloth clung to it, matching the shadow's cloak. He's wounded. And careless, I added, pocketing the cloth. The apothecary matchbox is our best lead. We must return to the manor and send a telegram to London to trace it. Back at the manor, dawn's gray light did little to lift the gloom. The household was in chaos. Robert Ferguson pacing, Isabella weeping, and Dr. Amos Carver tending to a shaken Elena. Jack, conspicuously absent again, was found in his room, his hands stained with dirt, claiming he'd been in the garden. His lies were piling up, but I focused on the immediate task. I dispatched a telegram to my contacts in London requesting information on Grimshaw and Sons and any sales of Sangre de Drago or related herbs. Then I turned to the nursery, where the blood-stained blanket and empty crib mocked our efforts. Using my portable chemical kit, I tested the red sap from the Jaguar box and the nursery floor. The results confirmed my suspicion. A mild toxin capable of causing bruising and bleeding, gums mimicking vampiric symptoms. Someone was orchestrating a charade, but the child's disappearance was no act. In the drawing room, I confronted Isabella. Mrs. Ferguson, the red liquid on your hands and in the nursery is a plant extract, not blood. Have you been administering it to Thomas? Her eyes widened and she clutched her pendant. Yes, but not to harm him. Elena gave me a remedy, a family recipe from Peru. She said it would protect Thomas from the curse. Curse? I pressed. You mentioned a family debt. Is this remedy tied to the Martinez pact in the diary? She nodded, tears spilling. My grandmother warned me about the Fergusons. She said their fortune came at our family's expense, that we were bound to them by blood. Elena's family served mine for generations. She insisted the remedy would keep Thomas safe. Elena, overhearing, stepped forward, her voice sharp. It's true, Mr. Holmes, the remedy is harmless, a tonic for strength. I would never hurt the child. Then why the secrecy? I asked, studying her. Her pendant, identical to Isabella's, gleamed in the firelight. And why does your pendant match the diary's symbols? She froze, then recovered. It's a family mark. It means loyalty, nothing more. Watson, standing by the door, whispered, Holmes, she's hiding something. Her eyes, there's fear there. I nodded, my mind cataloging her evasions. The diary's mention of a Martinez vow of revenge, the ritual symbols, and now this remedy suggested a deeper motive. But the child's safety was paramount, and the gunshot in the woods demanded answers. Dr. Carver approached, his face grim. Mr. Holmes, I've analyzed the bruise marks from Thomas's neck based on my earlier notes. The toxin you mentioned, it could cause such symptoms, especially in an infant. If he's been exposed repeatedly, his condition could be critical. How long does he have? Robert asked, his voice breaking. Days, perhaps less, Carver replied. Without treatment, the toxin could weaken his heart. The weight of the words settled over the room. I turned to the household. No one leaves until Thomas is found. Watson, check the attic again. I'll search Elena's quarters. Elena's room was sparse, her belongings neatly packed as if she anticipated flight. Under her bed, I found a hidden compartment in the floorboards, containing more vials of sangre de drago and a small notebook. Its pages, written in Spanish, detailed a ritual to cleanse the blood of the guilty. The symbols matched those in the diary and the clearing, confirming her involvement in the staged vampire myth. But did she take Thomas, or was she protecting him? As I pocketed the notebook, a commotion erupted downstairs. Watson burst in, breathless. Holmes, it's Elena. She's gone. She slipped out the back while we were distracted. I cursed my oversight. She's running, Watson, but not far. The woods are her only refuge. We gathered lanterns and coats, Robert insisting on joining us despite my protests. Jack, too, appeared, his eyes avoiding mine. I'm coming, he said, his voice flat. If Thomas is out there, I want to help. I studied him, noting the dirt on his boots, fresh, like the prints in the woods. Very well, I said, but stay where I can see you. The fog had thinned, but the moors were still a labyrinth of shadows. We followed the path to the clearing, then beyond, where the boot prints reappeared, now mingled with smaller, lighter steps. Elena's, I deduced, from her slight frame. The trail led to an old stone bridge, its arches crumbling into the stream. There, in the moonlight, we saw her, a lone figure clutching a shawl, her pendant glinting. Miss Martinez, I called, my voice sharp. Stop where you are. She turned, her face pale but defiant. I didn't take the child, Mr. Holmes. I'm protecting him from the real curse, the one you don't see. Explain yourself, I demanded, advancing. Watson kept his revolver trained while Robert and Jack flanked us. The Fergusons stole from my family, she said, her voice trembling. The fortune, the artifacts, they belong to us. I gave Isabella the remedy to keep Thomas safe, but someone else. They're using the old stories to destroy us. Who? I pressed, but before she could answer, a rustle came from the trees. A figure, the shadow, emerged, his cloak tattered, a fresh wound on his arm dripping blood. He raised a pistol, his face still obscured, and aimed at Elena. Watson shouted, "Drop it!" But the shadow fired, the shot grazing Elena's shoulder. She stumbled, clutching her arm, and the shadow vanished into the fog. Robert caught her before she fell, his face a mask of panic. "Holmes, she's hurt," Watson said, tearing his scarf to bind her wound. "And Thomas, where is he?" Elena gasped, her voice weak. "The manor. Check the old wing. I hid him, there, away from the shadow." I seized her arm, careful but firm. "Why hide him? And who is this shadow?" Her eyes fluttered, pain overtaking her. He's not alone. There's another inside the house. Before I could press further, her head lolled and she fainted. Watson lifted her, his face grim. Holmes, we must get her back and find Thomas. But the shadow, he's still out there. I nodded, the silver knife and notebook heavy in my pockets. The gunshot, Elena's flight, and her cryptic words pointed to a conspiracy deeper than I'd imagined. The manor held the child, but also the key to this maze of lies, and I feared the truth would come at a cost. As we turned back, a faint rustle in the woods made me pause. The shadow was watching, waiting, and somewhere in the manor, a child's life hung in the balance. The gunshot's echo still rang in my ears as we carried Elena Martinez, wounded and unconscious, back toward the Ferguson manor through the thinning fog. Her words, Thomas hidden in the old wing, a shadowy conspirator inside the house, burned. In my mind, each a thread in the maze of lies that had ensnared this family. The silver knife, the sangre de drago toxin, and the cryptic diary pointed to a deeper truth. One I, Sherlock Holmes, was determined to unearth before the darkness claimed young Thomas Ferguson. The moors, shrouded in mist, seemed to whisper of vampires and curses, but I knew the real threat was human, cunning, and close. Dr. John Watson, supporting Elena's limp form, glanced back at the woods. Holmes, that shadow, he's still out there, armed, and if Thomas is in the manor, why hide him? To manipulate someone, I replied, my lantern cutting through the gloom. Elena's fear suggests she knows more than she's told. The old wing is our next move. Robert Ferguson, his face etched with desperation, carried Elena's other side, while Jack trailed behind, his silence heavy with guilt. I noted the dirt on his boots, matching the prints in the woods, and the way his eyes avoided mine. His role in this drama was growing clearer, but I needed evidence, not suspicion. We reached the manor, its Gothic towers looming like sentinels. Dr. Amos Carver met us at the door, his medical bag ready. She's lost blood, he said, examining Elena's shoulder. The bullet grazed her, but she needs rest. See to her, I instructed, but keep her under watch. She's not to leave. Robert hesitated, his voice breaking. Holmes, what did she mean about the old wing? Thomas, is he alive? We'll find out, I said, turning to Watson. The old wing, likely abandoned, perfect for hiding a child. Let's move. The old wing, a crumbling extension of the manor, was sealed behind a heavy oak door. Dust coated the floor and cobwebs draped the walls, but faint footprints, small, like Elena's, marked the passage. A narrow staircase led to a series of rooms, their windows boarded, the air thick with decay. Watson's lantern cast eerie shadows, and I felt the weight of the manor's secrets pressing down. Holmes, Watson whispered, this place feels wrong, like it's watching us. Focus, Watson, I said, though the oppressive silence tested even my resolve. We followed the footprints to a small room, its door ajar. Inside, a makeshift cradle of blankets lay in the corner, and there, mercifully, was Thomas, pale, his breathing shallow, but alive. A faint bruise marked his neck, darker now, and a trace of sangre de drago stained the blanket. Watson knelt, checking the child's pulse. He's weak, Holmes, but he's here. Thank God. I examined the room, finding a small vial of the red sap and a note in Elena's handwriting. Keep him safe from the shadow. She hid him here, I said, but not to harm him. She believes the shadow is the real threat. Robert, who had followed despite my orders, rushed to his son, tears streaming. Thomas! Holmes! How can I thank you? By staying put, I said sharply. This is no resolution. The shadow is still at large, and Elena's motives are unclear. As Watson carried Thomas to safety, I searched the room, finding a hidden panel in the wall. Inside was a leather pouch containing a single artifact, a gold amulet, etched with the jagged circle symbol from the diary and Elena's pendant. Its craftsmanship was Peruvian, likely part of the fortune Edward Ferguson stole. The puzzle was taking shape: a vendetta, a staged curse, and a child caught in the crossfire. We returned to the drawing room where Carver was bandaging Elena's wound. She was conscious now, her eyes defiant despite her pain. "Mr. Holmes," she said, "I hid Thomas to protect him. The shadow. He wants the fortune, and he'll kill to get it." "Explain," I demanded, holding up the amulet. "This was in the old wing. Is it part of the Martinez Pact?" Her breath caught, and she nodded. "My family guarded those artifacts for generations. Edward Ferguson betrayed us, took them to England. My grandmother swore we'd reclaim them, but I only wanted to protect Isabella and Thomas." "From whom?" I pressed. "The shadow? Who is he?" She hesitated, her voice low. "I don't know his name. He came to the village weeks ago asking about the manor, the artifacts. He knew about the blood pact, the old stories. I thought the remedy would keep Thomas safe, but I was wrong." Watson frowned. "You gave the child a toxin, Elena. You nearly killed him." "Not a toxin," she insisted. "A tonic, diluted. My family used it for strength. I didn't know it would harm him." I studied her, noting the sincerity in her eyes, but also the gaps in her story. The sangre de Drago was indeed toxic in high doses, and her notebook's rituals suggested intent beyond protection. Was she a pawn or a player in this game? Before I could question further, Jack spoke, his voice cold. "She's lying, Holmes. She and Isabella, they're in this together. They want my father's money, his land." "Enough, Jack," Robert snapped. "You've caused enough trouble with your accusations." I turned to Jack, my gaze piercing. "Your boots are caked with mud, Master Ferguson, matching the prints in the woods. Were you following Elena or working with the shadow?" His face paled, but he shook his head. "I was just watching her. She's trouble, I told you." His lies were fraying, but I lacked the final piece to confront him. Instead, I focused on Elena. "Miss Martinez, where would the shadow go now, wounded and desperate?" Her eyes flickered to the window. "The ruins, an old chapel a mile from here. My grandmother spoke of it, a place of power for our rituals." "Then that's our destination," I said, grabbing my coat. "Watson, bring your revolver. Robert, stay with Thomas and Isabella. Carver, keep Elena here." Watson hesitated. "Holmes, it's nearly midnight. The fog's returning and that man is armed." "All the more reason to act," I replied. "The shadow's wound makes him reckless. We'll catch him tonight." Jack insisted on joining us, despite my suspicions. "I want to help find who took my brother," he said, his voice unsteady. I allowed it, keeping him in sight. The moors were a sea of mist, the ruins barely visible in the distance. A crumbling stone chapel, its spire broken like a jagged tooth. The boot prints reappeared, now uneven, suggesting the shadow's injury, slowed him. As we approached, the air grew colder, the silence broken only by the drip of water from the chapel's eaves. Inside, the chapel was a hollow shell, its altar cracked, its pews rotted. A faint light flickered from behind a stone pillar, and I signaled Watson to flank left. Jack stayed close, his breathing ragged. I crept forward, my stick ready, and saw a small campfire, its embers glowing. Beside it lay a blood-stained rag and a map, marked with the manor and the ruins. "Holmes," Watson whispered. "He's here." Before I could respond, a figure lunged from the shadows, the cloaked man, his arm bandaged, his pistol raised. I dodged as he fired, the bullet splintering the pillar. Watson tackled him, the gun skidding across the floor. I pinned the man's arms, his face still obscured by a scarf, but his eyes burned with desperation. "Where is the fortune?" He growled, his voice low, accented. Tell me, or the boy dies." "He's safe," I said, tightening my grip. "But you'll answer for this." Jack, frozen until now, suddenly bolted, grabbing the map and sprinting toward the door. "Jack! Stop!" I shouted, but he was gone, swallowed by the fog. The shadow struggled, then laughed, a chilling sound. "The boy's part of it, Holmes. You're too late." I bound his wrists with my scarf, but before I could question him, another gunshot rang out, this time from the ruin's outer wall. Watson ran to the door, his revolver ready, and I followed, dragging the shadow. Outside, the fog was impenetrable, and Jack was nowhere to be seen. The shot had come from a new source, a second conspirator, and the maze of lies tightened around us. "Holmes," Watson said, his voice shaking. "Jack, he's betrayed us. And Thomas, is he truly safe?" I clutched the map, its markings, hinting at a hidden vault. The truth was close, but the darkness was closer, and the sound of that second gunshot told me the hunt was far from over. The second gunshot's echo lingered in the fog-drenched ruins, a stark reminder of the darkness that threatened to engulf the Ferguson manor. Jack's sudden flight with the map, the shadow's cryptic warning, and the fragile safety of Young. Thomas Ferguson wove a tightening web of deceit. I, Sherlock Holmes, stood in the crumbling chapel, my prisoner's wrists bound, his bloodshot eyes glaring beneath his scarf. The maze of lies promised by this case's grim prelude, vampiric whispers and buried truths, was unraveling. But each thread revealed a new danger. Dr. John Watson, his revolver trained on the shadowed figure, glanced at me, his face pale. In the lantern's glow, "Holmes, Jack's gone. And that shot, who fired it?" Watson asked, his voice taut. "A second conspirator," I replied, tightening the scarf around the shadow's wrists. "And Jack's flight confirms his role. We must return to the manor. Thomas may be safe, but the game is not over. We dragged the shadow back through the moors, the fog swirling like a living thing. His wound, a graze from the earlier gunshot, slowed him, but his silence was defiant. The map Jack had taken was crude, but its markings, centered on the manor, suggested a hidden vault, likely holding the Peruvian fortune tied to the Martinez-Ferguson blood pact. The silver knife, the Sangre de Drago toxin, and Elena's rituals, all pointed to a scheme rooted in greed, not the supernatural. At the manor, we found chaos. Robert Ferguson cradled Thomas, now under Dr. Amos Carver's care, while Isabella knelt beside them, her face streaked with tears. Elena, her shoulder bandaged, sat under guard, her eyes fixed on the floor. I deposited the shadow in a locked pantry, instructing Robert to watch him closely. "Holmes," Robert said, his voice breaking, "you found Thomas, but Jack, where is he?" "A question I intend to answer," I said, turning to Elena. "Miss Martinez, you hid Thomas in the old wing. You claim it was to protect him from the shadow, yet your remedy poisoned him. Speak plainly. What is your role?" Elena's eyes flashed, but her voice was steady. "I told you, Mr. Holmes, the tonic was meant to strengthen Thomas, not harm him. My family's rituals are sacred, but someone twisted them, used the Sangre de Drago to fake blood to scare the Fergusons." "And the shadow?" I pressed, holding up the knife. "This bears your family's symbol. Is he your ally?" "No!" she cried. "He came to the village asking about the artifacts. I thought he was a thief, but he knew too much about the pact, the fortune. I hid Thomas to keep him safe from him." Watson frowned. "Then why not tell us? Why the secrecy?" She hesitated, her pendant glinting. "Because I feared the truth would destroy Isabella. Her family suffered for the Fergusons' greed. I swore to protect her." I studied her, noting the sincerity, but also the evasion. Her notebook's rituals and the amulet suggested a deeper motive, perhaps revenge. But my focus shifted to Jack. His disappearance with the map, his muddy boots, and his hostility toward Isabella pointed to a betrayal closer to home. I searched Jack's room, finding a hidden drawer in his desk. Inside was a letter, written in a hasty scrawl. "Meet me at the ruins. Bring the map. The fortune is ours if we act now. L.W." The monogram matched the cloth from the woods, confirming a connection. The paper bore the faint scent of the apothecary's herbs, linking it to Grimshaw and Sons. "Watson," I said, showing him the letter. "Jack is working with someone, likely the Shadow's accomplice. The initials L.W. are our next clue." Before we could plan further, Carver burst in. "Holmes, Thomas's condition, it's worsening. The toxin is affecting his breathing. We need an antidote, and soon." I turned to Elena. "The sangre. Didrago, what's in it? Speak, or the child's life is on you." Her face crumpled. "It's just the sap mixed with herbs, ayahuasca, coca leaf, but diluted. I didn't know it would harm him." Carver nodded. "In small doses, it's a tonic, but repeated exposure, especially in an infant, could cause bruising, weakness. I can prepare a counteragent, but we need time." "Do it," I said, then turned to Watson. "We must find Jack. The map leads to the vault, and he's likely heading there now." We armed ourselves and ventured back into the moors, the fog lifting to reveal a pale moon. The map's markings pointed to a cave near the ruins, hidden behind a cluster of gnarled trees. As we approached, I heard a rustle. Jack, crouching. By the cave entrance, the map clutched in his hands. His face was pale, his eyes wild. "Jack!" I called, my voice sharp. "Step away from the cave. You're in over your head." He stood trembling, but his voice was defiant. "You don't understand, Holmes. Isabella, she's ruining us. I had to do something." "Do what?" I demanded, advancing. "Poison your brother? Frame your stepmother?" His eyes widened. I didn't mean to hurt Thomas. I got the sap from a man in the village. He said it would make her look guilty, drive her out. I just wanted her gone." Watson grabbed his arm. "You poisoned a baby, Jack. Who was this man?" "Lionel Ward," Jack stammered. "He came to me weeks ago, said he knew about the fortune, the pact. He gave me the sap, told me how to use it." "L.W.?" I said, the pieces clicking. "The cloth, the letter. He's the Shadow's accomplice." Before Jack could say more, a shadow moved behind him. Not the cloaked figure, but another man, tall and lean, his face obscured by a hat. He raised a pistol, and I shoved Jack aside as the shot rang out, grazing my shoulder. Watson fired back, but the man, Lionel Ward, I presumed, fled into the cave. "Holmes, you're hit!" Watson cried, but I waved him off, the pain sharp, but manageable. "After him," I said, clutching my stick. We pursued Ward into the cave, its walls damp and echoing. The map's markings led to a stone door, carved with the jagged circle symbol. Jack, still shaken, followed, his confession spilling out. "I didn't know it would hurt Thomas," he said, tears streaming. "Ward said it was just to scare Isabella, to make Father send her away. I hated her, Holmes, her and her foreign ways." "Your hatred was manipulated," I said, examining the door. It was sealed, but fresh scratches suggested recent tampering. "Ward used you to destabilize the family, likely to seize the fortune." Watson pushed at the door, but it held fast. "Holmes, we need to get inside. If Ward's here, he's after the same thing." I traced the symbol, finding a hidden catch. The door groaned open, revealing a narrow tunnel. Before we could enter, a scream echoed from the manor, Isabella's voice sharp with terror. Watson spun, his revolver ready. "Holmes, the Shadow, he's escaped," he said, pointing to a figure running across the moors toward the manor. I cursed our oversight. The Shadow, freed from the pantry, was no longer a prisoner, but a predator. Jack's betrayal had exposed the family, and now the manor was vulnerable. The map in my hand promised answers, but the scream promised danger. "Watson, take Jack back," I said. "Secure the manor. I'll follow Ward into the tunnel." "Alone?" Watson protested. "Holmes, you're wounded." "No time to argue," I said, pushing past him. protect Thomas and Isabella, the shadows heading there. As Watson and Jack raced back, I entered the tunnel, the lantern's light barely piercing the darkness. The air was cold, the walls etched with symbols. Ahead, I heard wards, footsteps, and then a faint click, a trap or a lock. The fortune was close, but so was the shadow, and I feared the manor would face its darkest hour before I could return. The tunnel beneath the Sussex moors was a cold, damp labyrinth, its walls etched with symbols that whispered of ancient pacts and buried fortunes. Isabella's scream from the manor echoed in my mind as I, Sherlock Holmes, pursued Lionel Ward, the unseen accomplice in this web of deceit. Jack's betrayal, the shadow's escape, and the fragile safety of young Thomas Ferguson tightened the maze of lies foretold by this case's grim prelude. The fog outside seemed to seep into the tunnel, a reminder of the darkness threatening to claim another victim. My shoulder ached from the grazing bullet, but the map in my hand, stolen by Jack and now reclaimed, promised answers, and I would not falter. The tunnel's air was heavy, the lantern's light barely piercing the gloom. Ahead, Ward's footsteps echoed, uneven from his haste. The stone door's symbols, matching those in the diary and Elena's pendant, confirmed. This was the path to the Peruvian fortune stolen by Edward Ferguson. The Sangre de Drago toxin, the staged vampire myth, and the Shadow's attacks all pointed to a scheme to seize that wealth, with Thomas as leverage. I paused, hearing a faint scrape, a trap, perhaps, or Ward's attempt to block my path. That tunnel widened into a chamber, its walls lined with crates, their wood weathered but marked with the jagged circle symbol. At the far end, Ward crouched, prying at a sealed vault, his pistol discarded in his frenzy. I stepped forward, my stick raised. "Lionel Ward," I called, my voice echoing. "Your game is over. Step away from the vault." He spun, his face finally visible, lean, weathered, with eyes burning with greed. "Holmes," he snarled, "you're too late. The fortune's mine, and the shadow will finish what I started." "Finish what?" I demanded, advancing. "Poisoning a child? Framing Isabella? Who hired you?" He laughed, a harsh sound. "You think I'm the mastermind? I'm just the muscle, the syndicate in London. They want the artifacts, and they'll burn this manor to get them." "Syndicate?" I pressed, my mind racing. The matchbox from Grimshaw and Sons, the letter with LW, and the Shadow's coordinated attacks suggested a larger operation. "Name them!" Ward lunged for his pistol, but I struck his wrist with my stick, sending the weapon skittering. He stumbled, clutching his hand, and I pinned him against the vault. "Talk, Ward, or you'll face more than a bruise." "They'll kill me," he gasped. "The Blackthorn Syndicate. They know about the Martinez Pact, the fortune. They sent the Shadow to stir up the vampire myth, to scare the Fergusons into selling the estate." "And Jack?" I asked. "You used him to poison Thomas." "He was easy," Ward sneered. "Hated his stepmother, wanted her gone. I gave him the sap, told him it would frame her. The fool didn't know it was toxic. I bound his wrists with my belt, my mind piecing together the plot. The syndicate had exploited local legends and Jack's resentment, using Sangre de Drago to mimic vampiric attacks. Elena's misguided remedy had played into their hands, endangering Thomas. But the Shadow's escape and Isabella's scream meant the danger was far from over. I searched Ward, finding a crumpled letter in his pocket, sealed with a blackthorn emblem. It read, "Secure the vault. Eliminate obstacles. The manor must be ours by week's end. C." The initials suggested a leader, but no name. The map, however, was clearer. It marked this chamber as the vault's location, with a key hidden in the manor. "Holmes!" Watson's voice echoed from the tunnel's entrance, urgent and breathless. He appeared, his revolver drawn, Jack trailing behind, his face ashen. "The Shadow! He's in the manor. Isabella's barricaded herself in the nursery with Thomas." And the gunshot? I asked, dragging Ward along. Missed, Watson said. He fled inside, but we secured Elena and Robert. Jack confessed everything. He's ready to help. Jack's eyes were red, his voice trembling. Holmes, I didn't mean for Thomas to get hurt. Ward tricked me. I'll do anything to fix this. Your remorse is noted, I said coldly, but your actions have consequences. Show me where the shadow went. We hurried back through the tunnel, emerging into the moors as dawn's light struggled through the fog. The manor loomed, its windows dark, a faint cry, Thomas's, carrying from the nursery. I left Ward bound in the cave, guarded by the map's promise of his capture, and led Watson and Jack to the manor. Inside, the air was thick with fear. Dr. Amos Carver stood by the drawing room, his hands shaking. Holmes, the shadow. He broke in through a side door. Isabella locked herself in the nursery, but he's trying to get in. I raced upstairs, Watson and Jack behind me. The nursery door was barred, but heavy thuds echoed from within, the shadow attempting to break through. Isabella's voice, muffled but defiant, called out, "Stay back! I won't let you take him!" "Isabella!" I shouted. "It's Holmes! Open the door!" A pause, then the sound of a bolt sliding. The door opened, revealing Isabella, clutching Thomas, her face pale but resolute. The nursery window was shattered, glass scattered across the floor. The shadow had climbed in, his cloak caught on a jagged pane, but he was gone, fled into the manor. He tried to take Thomas, Isabella said, her voice shaking. He said the fortune belongs to him, that my family's curse brought this upon us. Your family's illness, not a curse, I corrected, examining the room. The Sangre de Drago vial was gone, likely taken by the shadow to continue the deception. The syndicate used your heritage to manipulate fear. Where did he go? She pointed to the hall. Toward the old wing. He was bleeding, his arm. Watson checked Thomas, his medical training taking over. He's stable, but weak. Carver's antidote is working, but we need to end this. I nodded, turning to Jack. You know the manor. Where would he hide? Jack hesitated, then pointed to a narrow staircase. The attic, he could be there, or the old servant passages. We moved swiftly, lanterns raised, the manor's creaking walls amplifying the tension. The attic was empty, but a hidden panel in the wall led to a cramped passage, its air stale. I found a bloodstain, fresh from the shadow's wound, and a discarded matchbox, another from Grimshaw and Sons. The syndicate's reach was clear, but the shadow's desperation was clearer. At the passage's end, a trap door opened to the roof. There he stood, the shadow, his scarf fallen, revealing a scarred face and wild eyes. He held a knife, the twin of the one I'd taken, poised to strike. Holmes, he growled. You can't stop this. The Blackthorn Syndicate will have the fortune, and I'll be free. Free to what? I asked, stepping closer. Watson's. Revolver trained on him. Kill a child? Ruin a family? He laughed, a bitter sound. The Martinez's owed blood, and the Fergusons stole it. I'm just the collector. He lunged, but Watson fired, the bullet grazing his leg. He stumbled, dropping the knife, and I tackled him, pinning him to the roof's edge. The fog swirled. Below the moors a sea of shadows. Whose sea? I demanded, twisting his arm. Your leader? He spat, his voice venomous. You'll never touch him, but I'll have my revenge. Before I could secure him, he twisted free, leaping into the fog. Watson fired again, but the shadow vanished, his laughter echoing. I cursed, finding only his scarf, stained with blood and the scent of Sangre de Drago. Holmes, he's gone, Watson said, his voice shaking. And the vault, Ward still there. We'll deal with Ward, I said, retrieving the scarf. But the map holds the key. The vault's in the manor, not the cave. Back in the nursery, Isabella clutched Thomas, her eyes searching mine. Is it over, Mr. Holmes? Not yet, I said, unfolding the map. A hidden mark, overlooked before, pointed to a cellar beneath the old wing. The fortune was close, but the shadow's escape and the syndicate's reach meant danger still lurked. I turned to the diary, its final pages revealing a sketch of the cellar, a vault sealed with the jagged circle symbol. Watson, gather the household. We end this tonight. As we descended to the cellar, a faint creak came from above, a footstep, deliberate and close. The shadow was back, or another agent of the syndicate. The maze of lies was collapsing, but the darkness was not done with us yet. The creak from above, a deliberate footstep in the shadowed manner, sent a final shiver through the fog-laden air as we descended to the cellar. The map's hidden mark, the Blackthorn Syndicate's plot, and the elusive shadow's escape had brought us to this moment. A confrontation with the truth buried in the maze of lies that had haunted the Ferguson estate. I, Sherlock Holmes, gripped the diary, its sketch of the cellar vault promising the Peruvian fortune that had fueled this deadly charade. The Sangre de Drago toxin, the staged vampire myth, and young Thomas's peril were all threads in a web of greed, and I was determined to cut them before the darkness claimed another victim. Dr. John Watson, his revolver ready, followed close. Behind, his face a mix of resolve and exhaustion. Holmes, the shadow's still out there, and that creak, someone's watching us. Indeed, I replied, my lantern casting long shadows on the cellar stairs. But the vault holds the answers. Stay vigilant, Watson. The household trailed us. Robert Ferguson, clutching Thomas, now stabilized by Dr. Amos Carver's antidote. Isabella, her eyes fierce with hope. Elena, bandaged but defiant. And Jack, his head bowed in shame after his confession. Carver brought, up the rear, his medical bag, a reminder of the stakes. The shadow's laughter from the roof still echoed in my mind, a taunt that the Blackthorn Syndicate's reach extended beyond our grasp. The cellar was a cavernous space, its walls damp and lined with ancient crates. The air was thick with the scent of earth and decay, the fog seeping through cracks in the stone. The map's mark pointed to a stone slab, etched with the jagged circle symbol of the Martinez Pact. I traced its edges, finding a hidden catch, my fingers steady despite the pain in my grazed shoulder. Holmes, Watson whispered, glancing upward. That creak, it's closer. I nodded, my eyes fixed on the slab. It shifted with a groan, revealing a narrow chamber. Inside, crates, overflowed with gold artifacts, amulets, statues, and ceremonial knives, all Peruvian, their craftsmanship exquisite. This was the fortune Edward Ferguson had stolen, the root of the Blood Pact's vengeance. Robert gasped. This is what they wanted? All this for gold? Not just gold, I said, lifting a jeweled dagger. Power. The Blackthorn. Syndicate saw an opportunity to exploit your family's secrets. Isabella stepped forward, her voice trembling. My family suffered for this. My grandmother warned me. But I thought it was just stories. Elena's eyes softened. I tried to protect you, Isabella. The remedy was meant to honor our ancestors, not harm Thomas. But it did harm him, I said sharply, turning to her. Your rituals, however well-intentioned, played into the Syndicate's hands. The Sangre de Drago was their tool to stage a vampire myth. Jack, silent until now, spoke, his voice raw. Holmes, I was a fool. Ward tricked me into using the sap. I thought it would just scare Isabella away. I never meant for Thomas to suffer. Your regret comes late, I said, but it may yet serve. Where is Lionel Ward now? Jack pointed to the tunnel. I left him bound in the cave, like you said. Before we could move, a shadow fell across the chamber, a figure cloaked, his scarred face now fully visible. The shadow, his leg bleeding from Watson's shot, held a knife, its blade glinting. The fortune's mine, Holmes, he snarled. The Syndicate will have it, and you'll pay for interfering. Watson raised his revolver, but I signaled him to hold. "You're outnumbered," I said, stepping forward. "Your accomplice Ward is secured. The game is over." He laughed, a chilling sound. "You think Ward was my only ally? The syndicate has eyes everywhere." A second figure emerged from the darkness. A man, broad-shouldered, his face obscured by a hood. The creak we'd heard was his, stalking us from above. He held a pistol, aimed at Isabella. "Give us the artifacts," he growled, "or she dies." Robert lunged to shield his wife, but I raised a hand. "Enough! The fortune is yours, but the child and family go free." The shadow hesitated, then nodded to his accomplice. "Take the crates. We leave now." As the hooded man moved toward the vault, I signaled Watson with a glance. He fired a warning shot, the bullet striking the ceiling, sending dust cascading. In the chaos, I tackled the shadow, wrenching the knife from his hand. Watson grappled, with the hooded man disarming him while Robert and Jack secured the crates. The shadow struggled, his strength fading from his wounds. "You'll never stop the syndicate," he spat. "C will bury you." "Who is C?" I demanded, twisting his arm. He grinned, blood staining his teeth. "Closer than you think." Before I could press further, Elena lunged forward, her pendant gleaming. "Enough lies!" she cried, striking the shadow with a crate. He slumped, unconscious, and I bound him with rope from the cellar. The hooded man, pinned by Watson, revealed his face, a local villager hired by the syndicate for muscle. "I just followed orders," he stammered. "Ward contacted us, said—" The fortune was easy pickings. I turned to the household. The vampire myth was a fabrication orchestrated by the Blackthorn Syndicate to destabilize the Fergusons. Ward and the Shadow used Jack's resentment and Elena's rituals to stage blood, bruises, and fear. The fortune was their goal, hidden here all along. Isabella clutched Thomas, tears of relief falling. "Then I'm not cursed? My son is safe?" "Safe," I said. "And your family's illness is treatable. Dr. Carver's antidote will ensure Thomas recovers. The curse was greed, nothing more." Carver nodded. "I've adjusted the treatment. He'll be well in days." Jack fell to his knees, sobbing. "Father, Isabella, I'm sorry. I let my anger blind me." Robert embraced him, his voice thick. "You're my son, Jack. We'll heal together." I retrieved the diary, its final. Pages confirming the vault's location and the Martinez betrayal. The blood pact was no supernatural curse, but a vow of revenge, twisted by time and greed. Elena, her face pale, admitted her role. "I thought the rituals would protect us," she said. "I was wrong." Watson, wiping sweat from his brow, looked at me. "Holmes, what about the syndicate? This C, he's still out there." "A problem for another day," I said, though the shadow's words gnawed at me. "We've secured the fortune and the culprits. The police will handle the rest." As dawn broke, the fog lifted, revealing the manor's towers in soft light. We handed the shadow and his accomplice to the local constable, who arrived with news from London. Grimshaw and Sons had been raided, revealing ties to the Blackthorn Syndicate. Ward, retrieved from the cave, confessed to supplying the Sangre de Drago, sealing the syndicate's plot. In the drawing room, I addressed the Fergusons. "Your family was targeted for its past, but the future is yours. Guard the artifacts or donate them to a museum. Let the pact die here." Isabella nodded, clutching Thomas. "Thank you, Mr. Holmes. You've saved us." Watson and I prepared to leave, the manor's oppressive air lifting with the fog. As we stepped into the carriage, I reflected on the case, not a vampire, but human greed dressed in Gothic guise. The shadow's warning about C lingered, a thread left untied, but for now the truth had prevailed. Watson, settling beside me, sighed. "Holmes, I'll never understand how you see through such chaos." "Reason, Watson," I said, smiling, faintly. It cuts through fear like a blade. As the carriage rolled away, the manor faded into the moors, its secrets laid bare. But the world held more mysteries, and I knew our next case was waiting. Want more thrilling mysteries? Subscribe and unravel the next case with us.